And so here is an amazing thing called the Valhalla. And so this is on the banks of the Danube near Regensburg. And this is King Ludwig I of Bavaria in 1807, when he was 20, during the Napoleonic Wars. He decided to start creating a Valhalla of great German heroes and German historic figures. And so he started commissioning busts of great Germans. And then when he became king 20 years later, he commissioned Leo von Klenze, his court architect, to build him this Greek temple on the banks of the Danube. And isn't it fantastic? And this is his painted design for it. And so he made this painting, an unbelievably beautiful painting. And he was a great painter and great everything, really. And here he is. And isn't that a fantastic face? I mean, I just love it. And he looks frightfully cross about something. We're not quite sure what. But the hairstyle's so good. And he obviously hasn't changed his hairstyle since sort of 1800 or something. And he's got all his decorations given him by the king. And the king clearly adored him. And he built the whole of Munich, really. And Munich is a fantastically beautiful city, or it was then. And he's holding in his right hand, you see an ancient Greek fragment of decorated marble, his inspiration. And this is his workroom in his house in Munich. Wouldn't that be a nice room to be sitting in during the coronavirus lockdown? Anyway, here is the Valhalla when I went to see it on my way to Italy one year. And it is absolutely spectacular and extraordinary. And it just sits up on this enormous platform up above the Danube. And you can just see the river down there. And there's about sort of maybe, a couple of Swedish hippies and one German family from, Nuremberg visiting. And otherwise it's pretty empty. It's a fantastic thing to go and see. And it really gives you an impression, in a way, of, the space inside a Greek temple, before they were all became ruins. Here's, anyway, the portico. And then inside, here is Ludwig I, and he was the grandfather, I think, of Mad Ludwig II, the famous Ludwig. But this is the much more interesting Ludwig, who pretty much built modern Munich and was a classical obsessive, and unfortunately had an Irish girlfriend called Lula Montes, which doesn't sound very Irish, but caused all sorts of scandals. And so he had to abdicate in the end. You see what I mean? You do get a sort of an idea of the interior of a Greek temple, just because of, the roof, the fact that there is a roof, really, I suppose. Although it's much too clean, etc., to be, an authentic Greek temple, which were always rather a mess, so far as I understand. If you read about them, there's, descriptions of them being just full of treasure, just mountains of treasure. Here you can see Ludwig's great collection of white marble busts of great Germans, but I can't identify them for you. But all around the walls, rather like there's that museum on the Capitol in Rome, and then these rather beautiful white marble chairs, also all designed by von Klenze. And look at that white marble cushion, lovingly carved, stuffed cushion. And then rather marvellous candelabras, another distinguished-looking German. And the light in there is fantastic. Absolutely, it's the most beautiful place. Well worth a detour if you're ever near Regensburg. And there's a detail of one of the chairs. And here, I love the white marble cushion. And I must say the light in there that day was quite wonderful. And then we go on and see one more of Ludwig's monuments. And so this is a thing called the Befreiungshalle, the victory and the Befreiungskriege, which was the war of liberation from Napoleon. Bavaria and various other German states had all initially signed up with Napoleon. The Duke of Bavaria had been made a king, so it seemed like a good idea. And then, of course, when Napoleon was beaten back in Russia and things started to go wrong, the King of Bavaria and his allies all sort of thought, actually, this might be a moment. We might be able to get rid of Napoleon. And so they all teamed up with the English and other people and beat Napoleon. And so then Ludwig obviously wanted to celebrate this. And so this is a drawing by Friedrich von Gärtner, who was another of his architects. And so he has drawn the Valhalla, the last one we saw, Klentz's monument, do you see, in dark grey on the bottom of the drawing. And then he superimposed his plan for the Befreiungshalle. And it's basically like, yeah, this will be bigger and better. Yeah. What von Klenze must have thought of this drawing. I mean, it's very strange, isn't it? But anyway, von Klenze was then given the responsibility for finishing the thing and actually getting it built. So this is Klenze's first design for finishing it up. And I suppose they just built the base at this stage. And this is his final design. And isn't that an incredible drawing? And his drawings and paintings are really amazing. But it is a very, very peculiar building. And it is on a vast scale. And you go up into it. I mean, it's complete megalomania, going up the steps into this thing. You can see here I've climbed up into the sort of colonnade that wraps round the drum, and looking down, and you can just see on the bottom right, there is the door with various families from Nuremberg coming in to celebrate the Befreiungs of the German people. But it is on a scale which is just insane. And there they are, like ants walking across that wonderful marble inlaid floor. Again, on an enormous scale. They're about 3 meters high or something, these angels. And there are the angels again. And then up the dome has this fantastic coffering and sort of gilding. And then here there's a kind of a walkway, a kind of ambulatory, going around the outside behind the angels. And so you can walk around, and presumably you were supposed to walk around thinking deep thoughts about your Befreiung. There's colossal white marble angels, do you see, are holding enormous bronze shields. I think the whole thing is on a scale not to be believed. And then here looking from behind the central pair of angels back towards the door. This is Innsbruck, Austria, and this is the tomb, or really the cenotaph, of the Emperor Maximilian, a tremendous patron of the arts in a way, or sort of, patron of artistic propaganda for himself. And so he commissioned Albrecht Dürer, to make that colossal woodcut, I think the biggest print ever made, of a triumphal arch representing the triumphs of Maximilian. Before he died, obviously, he started thinking about his tomb, and he wanted this to be in Innsbruck, and he died in Vienna. And so they buried him in a temporary tomb in Vienna, and he's still there. Or he was still there. I don't know. I think it might have been bombed in the war. But he never made it to Innsbruck, to his tomb in Innsbruck. And then his grandson, Ferdinand of the Tyrol, finished it up for him in 1580 or something. And then, unfortunately, the church, which was a rather beautiful sort of Renaissance church, I think there was an earthquake or a fire or something like that, and so in the early 18th century, and so it was redone in sort of 1730 or something in this kind of frothy Rococo white painted style, which doesn't really work that well, although it's quite a nice contrast to the completely mad enormous bronze figures which stand around the tomb. And so these are Habsburg ancestors and heroes. And these figures are about sort of 2.5 meters high or something. They're bigger than life size. They are enormous. Maybe they're even 3 meters. I mean, they're like those white angels on the banks of the Danube. And they are incredible. And they're all cast bronze. They're a rather eclectic group of people, including, quite a lot of Habsburg ancestors of interest, like Godefroy de Bouillon, who was the first king of Jerusalem. 1087, he was the king of Jerusalem. But the details are extraordinary. But some of them are marvelous. This is King Arthur. So not a Habsburg ancestor, and not anybody's ancestor, because he's more or less fictitious, I think, King Arthur, but the legendary king of the Britons, and so he's holding a shield with the English royal coat of arms on it to identify him as King Arthur. And then here's a detail of somebody, I don't know who, and look at that, fantastic, that chain with rectangular links and the sword hilt. And look at this man's beard, nicely curled beard, this fantastic helmet. And then this one has a collar that I suppose is supposed to be for some order of knighthood, but it's just completely nuts, isn't it? And it's got these tiny little cherubs all kind of playing around, completely lifelike, but on a tiny scale. Do you see? And then there's the helmet of the man. I mean, it's the most extraordinary thing. Look at that chain mail. I mean, the details are so extraordinary. It's really a fantastic thing. And then the cenotaph itself, the sort of empty tomb that these figures are guarding, is this thing here. And so it's in black and white marble. And then it's behind this grille. And the grille was added by Ferdinand of the Tyrol, who had the whole thing finished. And he had his court locksmith make the grille. And it's the most fantastic piece of sort of 1580s wrought iron. And then it's got all these sort of flat plates that have been painted, I think later, probably. Do you see? I think those have maybe been added. Maybe they were contemporary, don't know. But with the sort of cherubs and then these gilded flowers. I mean, it's so wonderful. And then on top, Ferdinand added the figure of his grandfather, Emperor Maximilian, kneeling in prayer. And you can just see him silhouetted against the window there. But here's another detail of that wonderful court locksmith's wrought iron grille. And then here a detail of the carving inside, which is unbelievably beautiful, and it's quite hard to see. You have to sort of peer through the grille. But there are these white marble reliefs of all of Maximilian's great achievements. And, of course, one of his greatest achievements was marrying Mary of Burgundy, who was the heiress of the Duke of Burgundy. And so he increased the Habsburg lands by, a huge amount by marrying Mary of Burgundy. And the inscription here, do you see, is saying something about the Sforzas. Probably, beat that Sforza, I suppose. And there's another panel about Henry VIII of England, which is quite fun. And then this is upstairs. This is the Silver Chapel. And so this is the chapel added by Ferdinand of the Tyrol. And this is his tomb here, and it's got this another wonderful grille by the court locksmith with silver little sort of flowers, do you see? And then this wonderful sort of black and white marble wall arrangement and some reliefs, and then he's lying behind the grille and we can't see him. But this is then looking into that chapel of his, and unfortunately he's behind another grille and you can't actually go in, which is very frustrating. And certain days you can go in and there's a fantastic thing of an organ in the corner there, and that's actually a Renaissance organ that is still played. And Ferdinand's suit of armour is kneeling on the wall above that. And then there's this wonderful altar. And outside the chapel, outside the grille, because she's not allowed in, is his first wife, Philippine Welser, and Ferdinand's wife, and it was a morganatic marriage because she was not of royal blood. But I think it was a love match, Philippine Welser. The altar in the Silver Chapel is why it's called the Silver Chapel. And so this altarpiece is made, it's ivory and ebony, and something like, 40 tons of ebony were used or something. Those, Germans, they like their numbers. But all of these figures and little sort of emblems are in silver. They're all in beaten silver. And Ferdinand was an adherent of some Marian cult, some sort of cult of the Virgin. And he promulgated this all through his territories, and all the churches in the Tyrol had to do these special masses for Our Lady. And so this is all about that cult, and the details of it, I don't know. But there is the Virgin, obviously, in the centre, and then surrounded by all of these emblems of the cult, all in beaten silver. And it's an extremely beautiful and very unusual object.